Marie Curie Fellow in the research department of the Jacques Delors Centre, and I am working on a project which is called the Hertie School, which looks at the impact of the COVID-19 pandemics on the regulatory governance of the EU. The starting point of the project is the fact that during the pandemic and even in the aftermath of it, new ways of governance have emerged that have partially changed the way in which the EU works and decides. So the idea behind the project is to try to understand the impact of these changes generally on the EU legal and political order, but more specifically on the relationship between the EU and the member states, and also on the power balance between institutions, so on the EU institutional balance. And I think if you take Next Generation EU, this is perhaps the most visible example of an instrument that was adopted during the crisis that allowed the EU to borrow money on the financial markets and redistribute it to the member states, so enhancing the distributive role of the EU. I argue that the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in a strengthening of the executive power at the EU level, but this is very common in crisis situations. However, if we look in particular at the powers that the Commission has gained, this has happened in a, I would say, unintentional way. So as a consequence of the fact that we had to take quick and effective decisions, and then the Commission was better placed to take on this role because of its neutral and impartial role. I think what the pandemic is a good example of is also the ability of the legal system to adapt to new situations and to new changes, because at that time we had to find a solution, and this was found within the EU legal framework, agreed by all member states with instruments that are of EU law. So we need this, no? We need this capacity of the system to adapt, because otherwise we would be powerless and blocked in the face of all new challenges. But the problem with the EU is that because of the multi-level legal system, and also because it has become so difficult, almost impossible to change the treaties, then we are always using existing instruments in new ways. Now, they are always leveraged beyond their purposes. And then obviously this has also consequences in terms of legitimacy, for instance. What I think surprised me at some point was this focus on money. Suddenly everybody was very interested in EU budget, on EU funding, on cohesion policies, which are indeed interesting things, but before nobody was even, there was barely any research or very specific in EU law, not much. The fact that the EU was giving out so much money to the member states changed the way in which the member states were approaching the EU. So I come from Italy, for instance, which is one of the, actually it's the biggest beneficiary of Next Generation EU money. And I could see really how this changed the political discourse in Italy. Even traditionally very Eurosceptic, far right-wing parties such as Meloni's party shifted the political discourse towards a way more Euro-friendly, and not even now that Meloni is in power, but even in the electoral campaign. And I think that part of it is because Italy could not afford to just give up on all this money. So it fostered a more cooperative way of looking at the EU. At the same time, I think that the question is, of course, also, what then this financialization of the relationship between the EU and the member states mean more generally, This is French coffee, so we're half Italian, half French. It's not that bad, actually.